Congratulations. Let's start. Lord, we thank you for allowing us to be here today on this wonderful beautiful day. There are a lot of storms that are happening across our country. Our friends and family in Texas are experiencing it now. Lord, we just ask that today be a day of solution. Thank you for allowing us to be together. All right, so I say we go ahead and get started. We have a very big program for you today. We have a very big program for you today. Many of you have seen and use all of our sensors today. So there are reports that are on your table. This is not a reading session. So we will not be going through and reading all of the reports. I do want to tell you that we are connected virtually to so there may be some folks that are watching us virtually. We'll be monitoring that, see if they have any questions. There is an advantage to coming in person. Get to see us, right? We're making. No, I'm just kidding. We're very honest. But the report that's on the table, we're going to talk you through the really big highlights of that. It's taken us 3 years to put this project together. One of the really great things about this project that we put together is we ended up looking at data across the community. We realized looking at state data. That way, you can find out this data on joinbsan.com. How many of you, let's be honest, have actually been to is that better?
Nope.
No.
I'll get some minutes.
So how many of you actually been to BSAN.com? Join BSAN.com. All right, much better than I thought. So good job. We actually get a lot of traffic on this website from across the country, which is really exciting. I would love to see more local traffic because that means our local folks are paying attention to what we're doing locally. But one of the things that we have developed, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, is our data dashboard. So we were looking at data when we started this program, the community planning program, and we were looking at the project to figure out where we were starting. What is our baseline? And many of you heard us talk about this, but I think it's relevant to talk about it again. So when we looked at our baseline, we were looking at state numbers, state reported numbers. Then we had common conversations. And the theme across the board was, well, those aren't the numbers we're seeing. So the numbers we're seeing in our backyard are not the same numbers that we're seeing reported across the state. There's a disconnect there, and that was our concern. So one of the things that we wanted to look at was what are we seeing in our community and why is that different? So we ended up putting a team together. It was the 911 call center and local law enforcement, which was Morganton PD and then the Burke County Sheriff's Department, and then your lovely BSAN staffing teams. We do not wear these t-shirts all the time. We wear them today, which means we can ask questions. So we actually put together a data dashboard team, and we decided to go through manually all of the 911 reports for overdose, unconscious, unknown, cardiac arrest. Lots of times when somebody calls 911, they say somebody's having a heart attack, and then we realize halfway through the call that it's really an overdose. And so once that call is made to 911, whatever it's initially coded as is what it's coded as. You can't change it in these calls. So we literally go through hundreds and hundreds of 911 reports to come up with actual legitimate data. Then the hospital joined the team. They send all of their emergency department data. We merge all of that together. What we found was that we were missing a lot. And these are only reported overdoses. When we say overdose, I do want to make sure that this is clarified. Overdose includes fatal and non-fatal. Report full. That's really relevant to understand. When we say overdose, that doesn't mean this means will not. It means this means right? And I think that's just important to recognize. So when we looked at overdoses, we started the project in 2021. We went back to 2022 and reviewed all those reports. And we realized that overdoses were up 18% in 21. What happened in 2020 and 2022? COVID, yeah, absolutely. So when COVID happened, we saw a huge spike. People were at home, people were stressed, people didn't have COVID skills. So what did they turn to? Substances. Right, absolutely. We have not seen a great solution for that yet. Until today. There's so much. But we are expecting that in 2022, the number will be higher. Now, I'm going to throw this out there. It's going to get higher until all these solutions are in place and working. So don't get scared and don't freak out. We're on our way, but it's going to look a little bad in the beginning. That's normal. When we talked about substances, we talk a lot about opioids. I'm not talking about the opioids you get at Table Rock Pharmacy, picking on the examiner, or the opioids you get at the hospital. I'm talking about heroin and fentanyl. Those are our huge problems. We've heard about it a lot in the news. We've seen it a lot. So between 2020 and 2021, fentanyl overdoses were up 313%. That's terrifying. Was that intentional fentanyl overdose? No. Was that intentional fentanyl use? Sometimes. One of the new trends is actually mixing heroin and fentanyl. That's terrifying. Heroin overdoses were up 23%. Now, you'll also see that there's a huge number in other and unknown. When there's an overdose, the person who's overdosing doesn't wake up and say, oh, let me tell you what I took. That's not how that works. So there's lots of times we have no idea what it is. I also want to point out, because I think it's really important, when we look at age of overdose, we think these are just stupid teenagers playing around experimenting with stuff. No, these are grandparents. These are Sunday school teachers. These are your kids. These are your brothers, your sisters, your moms, your dads. That's terrifying. Ages 19 through 60 are our highest rates. The kids aren't getting into this stuff. They are with marijuana edibles, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But for the most part, overdoses that we're seeing that end up with a 911 situation or an emergency room, ages are 19 through 60. We were shocked by this, to be honest. So, before we dive into a lot, I wanted to explain to you where we started all of this with the data. I'm going to turn it over to our Community Planning Coordinator, Lee Metcalf, who has worked really, really hard for the past 3 years to make this day possible. So,
So good morning, everybody. Thank you guys for coming out. So we're going to kind of dive into the books that are in front of you right now. If you'll open it up, you'll see that this is on the first page. So she has, as explained, this has been a 3-year time period, including it's been the planning process has spanned over a 3-year time period, including the following people. So, of course, the planning team is me. So I've been the program coordinator of the grant, and then we have Brandy Greer. So she's helped with this process by helping me gather information, and she is the DFC program coordinator of recovery. And then Kim Thanks, who is the program director of the grant and also the executive director of Work Recovery. If you on that one? I'm so sorry, guys. Okay, so I'd like to acknowledge the advisory team who have approved the steps in the process, and so this would include Dale Hanson, Tiffany Randazza, Steve Wisnett, Jason Wisnett, Carol Urban, and Shay Moore. And of course, we'd like to extend a very special thank you to the funding partner, the Reynolds Charitable Trust. Without this grant, we have never been able to unveil the depth of what was missing in our community. And we cannot forget our community partners, listed up, and we would like to extend a thank you to them as well. And that includes Work Recovery, New Dimensions Charter School, Burke County Health Department, the Catawba Valley Healthcare, the Cognitive Connection, Burke Chamber, Morganton Public Safety, Burke County Sheriff's Office, Burke County Public School, UNC Health Blue Ridge, and Burke County 911. Without everyone being a key player on this team, there is no doubt that my job would have been hard. So I give you guys an extra shout out. So let's dive into the heart of the project. If you'll flip into your books on page 14. We'll discuss the story map briefly before I hand it over to the UNC Institute for Public Health. So Burke Recovery has worked with the UNC team to develop an ARC GIS story map to characterize substance misuse in Burke County and add support to our treatment or prevention and our recovery. This story map includes an important substance use misuse related outcome in Burke County that are contextualized with a review of county level demographics to identify populations that are most vulnerable in Burke County. Locations of medical treatment and other supportive resources were then compared to the vulnerable populations to assess the degree to which services and resources were most available. The story map also characterizes the strengths of BSAN through an organizational network analysis. This also highlights gaps in sectors and potential areas to strengthen existing partnerships and engage in new partnerships across sectors and organizations. They also perform key informant interviews, which some of the may have been a part of. These interviews provided additional insight and recommendations.
Sorry.
For best to strengthen partnerships with community organizations. This story map is designed to be a decision support tool for Burke Recovery and BSAN. It's a snapshot of the community conditions at this current time. And NCIPH will continue to discuss with Burke Recovery about the long-term use of this tool. So now I'm going to turn it over to John and Jack, who are a part of the team, and I will let John and Jack tell you a little bit about themselves and what the roles that they have at UNC, and let them explain the story map in there.
Yeah, thanks everybody. We're excited to be here today to present this map and
I'm not gonna get rid of it.
is that all right?
Just pretend you're a
We were trying to keep it in the whole and we'll have to like pass the microphone back and forth. It'll be a little awkward. But we work with the North Carolina Institute for Public Health at UNC. So we're part of the School of Public Health there. And we do a fair amount of technical assistance and training for different local communities across North Carolina. So we kind of serve as the service and outreach arm of the university. We try and not be academics. We try and be more connected to communities and help communities understand their data and how to best visualize that, how to extract interpretation from meaning. And so this product that we have today is really just the start of what we've been able to create publicly. We'll kind of continue to tinker with it and add some information, especially as it goes up and live on the first BSAN website. So what we wanted to do is provide this kind of contextual information about substance use in the community within Burke County and kind of contextualize the data that we're seeing with the community conditions as they're reported through things like the census measures. And tell a little bit more of a coherent story in terms of what supports there are and what BSAN is doing and could do with additional support. So we're going to walk through this story now. It's going to be, so right now we're planning on posting it on the BSAN website. It's going to be one of those additional tabs. And so maybe I'll let Jack start with the introduction.
Hi, I'm Jack. I got brought on to NCIPH, specifically GIS, geographical information, work for this project back in December. I've been working on it since then. We'll continue to work on this project for the foreseeable future. But anyhow, I guess I'll introduce this. So our story map is a tool created by GIS that lets you take traditionally offline maps and publish them onto your website and put it into a website format. So you're able to, kind of scroll through like you would any website, but embedded within it are the same maps that you might be used to seeing in formal reports. So introducing this, we're going to be looking at substance use outcomes, demographics, social determinants of health, medical care availability, socio-ecological framework of opioid use, substance abuse health networks and community collaboration, and available resources in Burke County. We're also going to be looking at socioeconomic determinants that affect drug addiction and recovery, and how stigma may have influenced someone's ability to recover from their addiction. We'll also detail recommendation resources as well as limitations to our research. This was created for use by BSAN in conjunction with Burke Recovery. And our last part of their introduction right here is that we will be making a how-to video for some of y'all that haven't ever seen GIS maps before. We'll kind of detail how you're able to go through that. We're hoping to get that published within the next few weeks on the website. I'll turn it back over to John for health outcomes.
Yeah, so what we've tried to do is kind of layer in data, but not also, we also don't want to overwhelm folks with the amount of data because so much is available. We already see that there are dashboards abound from the state to provide data. There are dashboards that we have locally to provide additional outcome data. And so what we wanted to do is kind of take some of the key headline measures and think through, okay, so what can we help contextualize, but then also get into the community level factors, more related to demographics and socioeconomic and social determinants of health. So here we have just a quick kind of dashboard about the health outcomes. And so these are specific to deaths due to medication or drug overdose. And I think we selected right now just deaths because we have that additional information from the 911 calls and the dashboard that BSAN has as well. And so with this interactivity here, as it works, it's a little bit more interactive in terms of you want to scroll over and highlight some of these items. You see the different counts, and these are counts pulled straight from the state's website, and they come from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. And as we're exploring some of these larger trends, you can toggle between Burke County and North Carolina and see the different trends. And you also see that the graph down below is also changing as we do that. So right now, we'll move it back to Burke County. And you have the comparison. So I've just highlighted, so for example, benzodiazepine poisonings, and you can see how those have changed. And so we don't really intend to go through all of these data elements this morning right now, but I think it would be a nice tool to explore to provide additional information and context for when you're kind of exploring potentially even writing grants and you need some hard numbers that are used from the state. This can help support some of those processes. And so you can see with the tooltips, what pops up is kind of the count in the year and then the rate that we're showing as well. And then the second graph that I alluded to, it's a direct comparison for that particular selected item as it relates to Burke County, North Carolina. So for those items that are selected here, we're looking at synthetic narcotics poisonings. You can see that both in Burke County and across the state, they have both been increasing in 2019 and 2020. And I will say that the data that's available from BSAN is going to be much more updated because that is directly from 911 calls. It's local data, whereas these, we have to wait on the state to process the data. So right now, they have data from 2020, and so it's lagged by about a year and a half. And so it is a little bit delayed, and again, another reason and rationale for local context and local data. And so we have a similar dashboard here to highlight some key demographics, just to kind of characterize the population. You all know what the demographics are of your county, but it's helpful context in terms of other folks to help understand Burke County. We just have things broken out by age, race, ethnicity, and gender as well. And then you can look, these are estimates from the American Community Survey, 5-year estimates that are used by the US Census. And so we have 2016 or the 2020 most recent data, and then the data prior to that as well. And then we have information on social determinants of health. And so these are at the county level. And we're looking specifically at some household factors. We're looking at things like unemployment, health insurance availability across different age characterizations. And you again can toggle between the most recent data and then the period right before that. And so yeah, those are our social determinants of health at the county level, and then I'll turn it back over to Jack to go through the maps and social determinants of health and demographics.
Sweet. Starting off, we're looking at our demographics. And so this is our first map in our story map here. It's click interactive. So essentially, click on the census tract and it'll give you information for that census tract. The first of our 6 slides for this part will give you information for our overall population per census tract, Black or African American population, Hispanic population, and white Caucasian population. And that's just click interactive for each census tract. And it's Zoom interactive as well. Right there. So you can zoom in a bit more and get a better idea of where exactly that is within Burke County. We also do this for American Indian population, same process here, just click interactive, and I'll let you know the total percent for each population in each census tract. Black and African American population specifically as well. Hispanic population. People of color, and that just means non-white folks in Burke County. And then last is white population in Burke County. And you can see in the bottom left here is the legend, and that just gives you the overall percentage being shown within each of these maps. Sorry about that. But our next part here is looking at those social determinants of health that John just mentioned earlier. Right off the bat, we're showing our SQH index that we as the Institute put together for KBR. This kind of gives a more statewide approach, showing all the different counties that we take a look at. It also gives a better explanation of what exactly SQH means. And so what it is, it's 12 indicators that we use to indicate disparities compared within neighborhoods at the census tract level within counties. Those can include median household income, individuals living below the federal poverty line, uninsured individuals as part of the economic domain. It can include income and inequality, individuals with greater than a high school education, limited English-speaking households, single-parent households, and low access to food sources as part of our social neighborhood domain. And lastly, in our housing and transportation domain, that would be households living in rental places, housing where it's cost burden, households without a vehicle, and crowded households, which means more than one person per bedroom.
Sorry, I just wanted to contextualize this as well. As we're going through these maps, this first one it is an overview of all the funded areas from the KB Reynolds Charitable Trust through their Healthy Places initiative. And so this is kind of providing a relative comparison of where Burke County is in comparison to the other funded areas, the funded counties from the KB Reynolds Charitable Trust. And so that's kind of a pulled out view. And then we'll scroll down to get to the Burke County specific measures as well. And I wanted to just contextualize the SQH domains and indicators. These are ones that we have selected with the KB Reynolds Charitable Trust. But if you think about the larger picture of how they fit to substance misuse, some of these factors contribute to causes or contribute causes for why some people might be more impacted or have differential impacts of substance misuse and or lead to some abuse of substances. And so, yeah, now scrolling down, we can go to those different domains. And so we have the pulled out view of each of those items that Jack just mentioned. So we've grouped these by domains to be able to see across the board which of those particular areas in Burke County have those higher percentages. And what we want to do with this is not really think about how this might, we don't want to further stigmatize particular areas within Burke County, but when we're thinking about how to best align our resources and where those people in need of services might be and or those most vulnerable folks, we want to potentially focus in on specific areas. And so this provides that additional context for how to kind of tailor the services to the needs of the people in the community.
Yeah, and as John was talking, I was just kind of scrolling through our first housing and transportation domain maps. And just like the demographics map, it's a click interactive legend at the bottom left corner, just showing the percentage wise. The darker shades indicating the higher percentage points, lighter shades can indicate all the way down to 0%. And as we can see, generally speaking, we're seeing darker shade pattern around Morganton area. Probably fair. But, and into the next one, we have our economic domain maps, and it's the same deal as the previous one. Click interactive, you have zoom button on the bottom right hand corner, legend at the bottom left, and you can just scroll through and see how they match up for each of the different census tracts. And then finally, our social and neighborhood domain maps, and again, same deal there. And after this, we're actually going to be comparing the CDC's 2018 Social Vulnerability Index, which is their version of the Social Determinant of Health Index. It's their overall scoring, which takes into account a set of 15 factors, and we're going to compare it against our 12 factors and just kind of take a look at whether or not they're matching up. And it gives a good idea of if what the CDC is looking at risk for disease outbreak is the same for our at risk for negative health outcomes as well. Sorry. And same deal with the swipe tool here, and we can see the CDC is scored from a 0 to 1, where 1 is the most at risk, and ours is scored from about a -0.5 to 1, where anything above 0 means you're at risk. And we can see a somewhat good correlation between the same census tracts, but it is important to note that they are comparing different factors than the SDOH does. So areas that aren't actually correlating together, it doesn't mean there isn't a problem there. It just means they're looking at different stuff than us. I'm not sure if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think the reason we're highlighting both of these is kind of the index that we created with the KBR Charitable Trust is one way to kind of amass a lot of different indicators, as is the CDC's Social Vulnerability Index. And the CDC's measure, it is used broadly. It's been used around COVID and disaster preparedness and in different community conditions. And so we just wanted to show how those two align. And I think, yeah, once it's up on the website, we all can explore it at our own time.
Our next section is looking at medical care availability. This is more of a general overview that's going to be continuously updated as we get better information. All of this has been pulled from state level North Carolina quality of life information, and we're hoping to get that updated more, make sure I actually pull the right information here. Medical care availability, we have one major hospital, UNC Health Blue Ridge, and there are 5 within what we call driving distance of the county. We have 7 EMS stations covering Burke County, and that pulled that from Burke County's website itself. And I'm pretty confident the one at the top left is just for Linville Gorge. But as you can see, most of them are centered around Morganton, not covering some of the more rural areas as well. As part of North Carolina Quality of Life as well, they have information on what is classified as a mental health home. There are 87 medical facilities in Burke County, with 40 being classified as mental health homes. Of these 40, the vast majority of them are actually considered elderly home facilities. So it's a bit deceptive, and looking into it a bit further, we're actually going to take a look at some of the more key organizations that help with substance recovery that are also classified as mental health homes. This is the same deal as all the previous maps. It's just zoom and click. As you can see, the vast majority of these facilities are centered around Morganton as well. And you can just click on each of these icons, and it'll give you the name of each of those substance recovery centers.
And what's the year of the study?
This one would be coming from the previous census release, so that would be.
Right, so that would have been about 2021.
And we can definitely, this map here definitely is also going to be continuously updated as we get more organizations and their locations that we want to see added to this map as well. I should give that caveat. Our next section is kind of looking at some of the factors behind substance abuse, and that's called a socio-ecological framework. It's a mouthful, I know that. It's something I do at Gillen School of Public Health at UNC. We call it SEF for short, but basically what it does is it looks at a problem at 5 different levels: individual characteristics, interpersonal connections, living and working conditions, regional, national, and local systems. And I've kind of merged regional and national together there. But essentially what this does is, if you think of any problem, kind of look at it from a top down and bottom up basis and kind of think, is there something happening in this person's life that's going to make them more likely or less likely to do something? And I've just given some of the key examples here. And there's plenty more you could add at each of these levels. And it's just something sort of to help you start to kind of think about why someone would do something. That was very vague, but moving on anyways. Our next section is looking at substance use and stigma. What are the challenges to recovery? Why is it difficult for people to go from A to B, essentially? And so what this is a little diagram that just helps you plug in some of the information that SEF and think, how does access to medical care availability affect someone's ability to go from substance addiction to recovery? And I think that's a pretty good example. Limited access can reduce their ability to recover. But how does someone's insurance status, or how does someone's opioid users in their social circle affect their ability to recover? And so essentially just kind of taking any of these words included in the SEF and plug them in either here, or over here. And just kind of thinking, how does that affect that pathway? It's a good way to think about how stigma affects.
Yeah, and to provide a little additional context with that, that's kind of more of how we go about asking our questions in terms of what are the factors that influence substance use, and how can we think about that in terms of a decision framework, so that when we're using this tool to help drive maybe funding decisions or help inform partners, we can actually use some of those logic models and frameworks to help design interventions. And so as we're walking through this story, I think we're trying to contextualize like the outcomes, the people potentially most impacted, some of the frameworks and theory for how to go about addressing it. And then what we've done in these last couple sections is look specifically at the BSAN network. And we wanted to focus on the existing partnerships that are already a part of this network and think through, okay, so what are those systems, who's partnering with who, where could those networks be strengthened, and who are those sectors maybe that aren't as involved, who is not in this room in terms of sectors or maybe even organizations that could be important players, and how do we engage them? So that's kind of the next section here, to talk through this organizational network survey. And so it was about a year ago this time, Kim probably bothered a lot of people for a survey, and that was on behalf of us, and so apologies for that survey, but we really wanted to get some information about you all as providers. What organizations are you partnering with to address substance use within the community? And so this survey was open from July to October, and we had about 54 organizations respond. and identify the partners that they're working with. And so the sectors represented were governmental agencies, substance use related agencies, social services, healthcare providers, and even some judicial and law enforcement sectors as well. And then what we did once we asked, okay, who are your partners at the organizational level? We made kind of this big, I mean, it turned into a spaghetti model of who's partnering with who, but I think what that results in and what that shows is that there are a lot of connected partnerships within this network. That's why we have the network, that's why we have partnerships. And so it was affirming to see the connectivity within, say, for example, these centrally located organizations. And we didn't want to highlight specific organizations within this, it makes for a messy map. But then who are these organizations? What are these organizations more on the fringes, more on the outside, that are not as well connected? So we've got a list, and we've been working with Work Recovery to identify who those are and kind of summarize this data, because those could be important sectors, they could be important organizations to help provide a more comprehensive grouping of services for addressing substance misuse. And so in terms of the results, we wanted to look at who's most connected, and then have kind of a more statistical measure of who's most influential. So who is connected to also strong partners. And we did not do this on purpose, but Work Recovery was one of the stronger connections here. And I think that also speaks to them as being kind of a hub and a coordinating agency. You can see these are kind of the top 10 organizations that were either most connected or most influential. And so you can see some of the normal or the organizations that we'd be familiar with here, some of the governmental agencies, some of the direct care providers, as well, being both connected and influential. And so when we think about those two measures combined together, we have a list here of those connected and influential organizations. So you can see those there, and think about where they operate in the realm of providing treatment, prevention, recovery services, and the whole kind of wraparound system of care as well. And so that was kind of our main finding, that we had these connected organizations, but then we also now have a list of the sectors, and we also have the organizations that weren't very well connected, but we don't want to highlight organizations. We want to think about sectors that are less connected and how we actually go about reaching out and partnering with them, building this kind of partnership network. And so specifically, we noted the education sector and different community organizations could be more connected within the network analysis or within the network of BSAN. And so then our last item that we did, again, this was some of the key employment interviews, other aspects of folks, was to talk specifically with some of you all in terms of what makes for a good partnership. How do you go about broadening partners, and what are strategies, and why are people partnering? So we had some key informant interviews to focus specifically on how organizations work together. And apologies, this screen resolution is quite right for it. But we asked them what specifically makes a good partner. So we focused on values, relationships, communication strategies, and what are some barriers to partnership. So, communication, leadership, competition at times, all can influence the way organizations partner with each other. And then specifically, like, how do some of these organizations that we spoke with, how are they choosing partners? How do they go about creating partnerships? And it's kind of aligned or shared values, shared missions, service to the same individuals, and reputation, frankly. So that can be a double-edged sword that might make it a little bit harder for new organizations to become more immersed in this network. But I think that is an important factor that came out of this analysis, that we are cognizant of the reputation of some organizations and want to make sure that we're able to reach out to new organizations that maybe don't have as much of the ability to build a reputation yet. So in terms of the current partnerships, what we heard is that there are short-term and long-term initiatives. And you can see those here. For short-term, it's more education, provision of services, looking at social determinants of health and resources there. And then long-term thinking more specifically about some of those more systems approaches, so diversion programs, sustainable funding models, and moving those items forward. And so then we also have a slide on what would happen without partnerships. So loss of purpose, loss of services, obviously, and loss of resources, all making the case that we want to have a much more connected and comprehensive network of supportive services in Burke County. And so these are some of the strategies that were identified. And so both through networking, marketing, and then through BSAN meetings as well. All right, so we've talked a lot, that's it. But we also are open to questions if y'all have them. We have some links to supportive organizations and just wanted to be upfront about some of the limitations and the gaps in data as well.
So I feel like there was not much said about ethnicity in this
Sure, absolutely.
and equitable care and that kind of thing. Is that just an oversight or?
So no, it wasn't. I would say that we kind of scrolled through these quickly just in the interest of time. We have identified when we think about all of these different, we look at both demographics, but then also specifically some of the factors that even beyond ethnicity contribute to differential impacts of health and well-being. And so those are included here. I mean, in the demographics, we have called out specifically race and ethnicity. And we've put these on maps. I just didn't want to highlight that because sometimes the mapping can feel a little bit stigmatizing to show particular areas. But those data are in there, and I think that is a big component of what needs to be included for kind of community-wide services. Absolutely.
I think especially for the Spanish-speaking community.
Right, I agree. Absolutely. All right, thanks, Joe.
I'm gonna tell you, I love GIS mapping. I think it's great when someone else does it and I can just use it. And so, these guys have been really wonderful. And it's not just them, they actually have a whole team of folks that have been working on it. I do want to address the question for just a minute that Alice asked. And so in the actual report itself, again, we're not going to read it all to you, but we do talk about different ethnic groups and really subcultures is what we call them throughout the entire community that need more focus. That includes gender, that includes the Hispanic community, that includes specifically the Guatemalan community, that includes the Hmong community. And we also talk about LGBTQIA+ community and how do we reach them and what is the stigma of substance use and what does it look like. So that's mentioned a couple times in the report. Again, it's 60+ pages. Enjoy. So I'm going to turn it back over to Lee, but again, I do want to say that John and Jack will be here for the rest of the meeting and we will leave some time at the end for questions.
So, John and Jack, we would like to thank you guys because this has been a long process. Without you, we wouldn't have this. We wouldn't be able to, kind of see where we need to build up our partnerships within agencies, or where even social determinants are in our counties that we can work on now. So I'm going to give it to Brandy. Actually, she's going to talk to you guys about some community successes. Now we are going to go through this community planning report kind of briefly because it's 60+ pages and we want to be mindful of your time, so we're just going to highlight certain points.
I was sitting there thinking about when I had to go up here and talk, and you guys have done so much work already, and then I'm like, celebrate, and then it's gonna be work again, so this is celebrate sandwich, and I'm the only phone you're gonna have today. So I just wanted you to know that. So I think that it's important for us to try and figure out where we're going now. It's impossible to do that without acknowledging where we've been. So there have been a lot of challenges that we've experienced during this time, but we've had this grant and we've had this funding and we've been trying to put the story map together. But despite all of those, we have had some really wonderful successes that have spawned from it. And I would say one of the challenges, of course, was the big C word that we don't even like to say anymore, right? But that put us in a position as the Drug Free Burke team where we had to come up with something different. So we are community outreach. We're used to going to places, talking to people face to face, doing trainings, providing education, information, things like that. And that was all shut down very quickly, right, and abruptly. So what we decided was, despite COVID, we were gonna have to figure out an alternative community outreach plan. So the team got together and we gave ourselves 72 hours. And you guys may have heard this story before, but we were like, we're gonna be without a job. They're not gonna pay us to not come in and not do anything. So what are we gonna do? So within 72 hours, we did a bunch of brainstorming and we decided, okay, we're gonna go social media outlet, right? Because it quickly became the most popular form of communication and outreach. So that was our next big step. We developed a talk show called Real Talk with Real People. How many of you guys have watched this on our Facebook page? You get extra points. Thank you for watching it. It's really good. And it's not necessarily geared towards the folks who show up for the meetings, because you guys are getting a lot of the information when you come here and spend time with us, and because you are involved in the human service field. But it's one of those things that we wanted to be able to get out to the public. We work with folks who are experiencing tough times in their life, and we need to be able to be there for them whether COVID's happening or not. As a matter of fact, it's made things worse, so we need to make ourselves more available. So when we put together this talk show, the purpose was to, first of all, address hard conversations, things like having healthy relationships, setting healthy boundaries, not becoming so isolated that you begin to fall back into risky behavior, things like that. We wanted to address current drug trends. We did public service announcements, and then we had the sheriff's department contact us one day and say, we've had 4 overdoses in 24 hours. There's a bad batch of heroin in our community. It's packed with fentanyl. People are dying. Can you please go on your talk show and tell everybody what's happening? So we were able to do things like that. Within the first year, we had over 1 million views and people watching, and it's not always nice when you're on social media. People who have comments and things, people are not always polite, but you know what? It started a conversation. And a lot of times, some of the stuff that people came up with was really not accurate information. So it provided us an opportunity to get yelled at, one, because everybody needs a little variety in their life, but two, to give people, you know, correct places to look for information and help them maybe see it from a different perspective. If nothing else, at least plant that seed so that that option is there. We also try to provide information on laws and policies, things that are coming up in our government, locally, federally, and in the state, because we think it's important for folks who are involved in this field to be on top of things like that, right? So that was one of our great accomplishments. I think that everybody should be pleased that there have been community successes that have gone on through this process. The overwhelmingly positive response we got from Real Talk has caused that even now things are open back up, we're still gonna do it. We were trying to do 3 or 4 a week, which was fine, and we couldn't leave the building, but that is absolutely not possible when you have the rest of your job to do. So we cut it down to once a week. But if you do tune into that, it's on the Work Substance Abuse Network page on Facebook, and we do update those, and we put all kinds of stuff on there. Events, we highlight community agencies. We put everything we can on there that we think will be helpful to you and your family, your neighbors, and people who might need that information. The next big thing that we were able to do, it had been in the works and had been a conversation before the KB Reynolds planning team started, and I would like to just take 1 second and say that one thing that I noticed, because I get to put my fingers in a whole bunch of different things because of the position I have, this funding allowed us to build more relationships in our community than any other thing I've ever been involved in. It allowed us to do support groups, it allowed us to meet with other people. That's so important, I think. You can't diminish the importance of that. So that's one thing it allowed us to do. But this had been on the table, Purple Elephant. Is anyone familiar with that? Right, so this is Burke. This is Burke County's own Purple Elephant. Burke stands for Burke Urgent Response Team. I mess it up every time I say Burke Urgent Response Team. It's not his own response team, it's for Burke County. But when we had this time and we had the availability to meet with people and we had options more than we had before because of this grant, we were able to really put some teeth behind this and get it going. So we put together a training. This is actually a community-wide initiative where we go to different agencies, churches, gathering places, businesses, and empower them to be part of the solution for our community. So if they're interested, and it's a big undertaking, so not everybody can do it. Every place is not appropriate for it, but those who are willing and the places that can support it, it's been very successful. What we do is we go in and we train those folks how to handle somebody who might come to them in a crisis situation. We get all the 911 calls at work recovery, so we're able to go through those things and we see that people come into their place of employment in the morning and there's somebody who's and an active overdose on the sidewalk at their building, they don't know what to do. Folks want to know what to do. So we provide this training. It teaches them what to look for, what behaviors might be common to certain substances. We provide them with Narcan training, we give them Narcan, we bring this whole big kit out. We teach them how to deal with these folks empathetically, how to show them compassion, how to have a non-judgmental spirit towards them. It makes people feel like they care about them. And then we also give them the training so that they know how to contact the next person in line, right? Do they need to go to the hospital? Do we need an ambulance? Do we need to get Narcan started intravenously from EMS? Do we need to call the mobile crisis unit so someone can talk to them about what their next steps are? Do we just need to help them get the 1-800 number for partners so that they can get an appointment to have an assessment? There's a next step. And these folks who are trained in this can help that person get to that next step. Once those businesses have completed that training, they get like a window clean that goes in their window, and it's got a purple elephant on it. So folks in the community who are struggling with substance use or mental health issues, when they see that window clean, they know they can go in and somebody there is going to have the tools that they need to help them. So that's a huge initiative. It's just now really getting off the ground because we can go into places, but KBR Reynolds helped us make that happen and build those relationships, even with those businesses, so that we could let them know what was out there and what was available. The next thing that we'll talk about is the data dashboard. I'm really not going to talk about it because Kim did. And the one thing that I would point out there is she mentioned we have the sheriff's department, the police department, the 911 call center, the hospital emergency room. When you see a community that can get all of those people together, working on the same thing to achieve a common goal, that's success. And I think that that's something we should be celebrating. And it was not easy. And some of the folks who participate in some of those things still have a hard time with, some of the things that we're doing and the progression that we're making in this field, but they're open-minded and they're listening and there's conversations happening. But this was one of the huge successes that we were able to get, although it was, in my opinion, a huge undertaking. And it's a lot of work, yeah. But it's a great thing to have, and it really brought us closer to what our actual numbers were. Us being able to collect our local data, not just looking at the CDC's overdose things. I mean, there were like 60, was it 440, yes. 560 some. Yeah, there was a huge difference in what they were reporting as overdoses and what we were actually experiencing as overdoses. And you guys know as much as I do, the numbers are important when you're trying to get money, when you're writing grants, when you're trying to get people to listen to you, and those stories are so important. So for us to get closer to an actual number really made a big difference, and I think that that's going to continue to help our community in a lot of different ways. The next thing that's on here is the Trident Task Force. This is a huge success. So you guys are BSAN. There's a lot of BSAN missing today, but we know that they're out there and they get to come when they can. But you guys do such a great work for our community. You are our Adult Substance Use Coalition. What we have found is since the average age of first use in Burke County is 12.5, we might need to be doing something with our youth. So Lee is heading up our youth coalition, and it's called the Trident Task Force. And we already have quite a few kids who are participating in it, and they're from middle school to high school, right? So we're looking at upcoming 6th graders through 12th grade. We have talked to 2 of our middle schools. We're working on talking to a 3rd. We are actively in MDS with our public charter school, and they are very active in this process. This is a youth-led initiative. They make the rules, they make the events, they set up the programs, the advertising, the commercials, whatever it is that happens, they're doing it. And they are teaching each other prevention and providing education and providing information. And you guys know as well as I do, yeah, if you have a 14-year-old, which is what I have, and he's no fun, but he doesn't think I'm any fun, and I think I'm tons of fun. But he's not gonna listen to me like he's gonna listen to those boys he goes to school with. And if those boys he goes to school with are saying, man, that's not a good idea, man, I heard this about it, man, that's not true, this is what's actually true, I'm learning it from a good source, then that's what he's gonna remember. Whether parents are important, we're still the main influence in their life, but we know that they listen to peers probably more so, even if you don't want to, they're going to, because that's just how it works when we're that age. So we are making that happen, and Lee is a huge part of that, and I think that's gonna be real successful, and I think that that's long-term change, right? That's an investment in our community. If our middle schoolers go to high school and say no to drugs, which is pretty simple, but if they do that, that we don't have 3 overdoses in 2 weeks like we had a month ago in our high schools, okay? So I think that there's a potential for some real change there. The next one that's a success, and I'm talking fast, but I want to get you guys ready for what we're going to do here after the actual meeting. The Bird Rally, has anybody participated in the recovery rally? Yeah, a lot of the people here have, and we're so thankful for that because it's huge. It brings people in, not just from our community, but from surrounding communities, and that's one of my favorite parts because drug use doesn't stop at the Burke County line. It goes into all the counties that surround us, and not only does that, but our friends and our family and our neighbors and all those folks, they don't all live right here in Burke County. So we think it's super important to be entangled with folks from other counties, right? We want to tear down those county lines and open up the opportunity for people to get help where they need it, when they need it, as fast as we can get it for them, right? We had over 600 participants at this year's rally. That is people who came to participate and people who showed up from agencies and support groups. And we had multiple counties involved in it. And they were still worried about COVID. So my imagination says this year will be twice that many, right? Because maybe we'll be past the COVID scare and it'll be easier. But we did change our venue this year. Usually we do it downtown. This year we did it at the Toggle Meadows Park. I always want to call it Martha's. It's not. But one of the reasons we chose to do that is because of the beanstalk. That gives us an opportunity to give people fun and activity. They can play in the park, they can walk, and we want to encourage a healthy lifestyle. We find in substance use, and I find in recovery, it's important to me to find things that make me just as happy, that I can get just as much exhilaration, release just as much dopamine, doing things as I got when I was using, right? So doing things like that and incorporating that with recovery shows people that we can change their mindset and we can create a healthy lifestyle. So that was a really big success for us this year. And that's the biggest one we've had since I've been here. So that's the 3rd or 4th one I've been involved in, and it was a great success. Thanks to you guys. The last thing, and there's not a slide, I just want to mention is what we're doing after the meeting today, which is our secrets reveal. This is our community voice simulation. This is actually a traveling simulation. This has spawned during this KB Reynolds time, and it's been super successful. We give you a scenario, you get to go through a teenage boy's room. It's actually much cleaner than a teenage boy's room, because my kids' room's never that clean. But there are a lot of things in there that may be indicative of substance use or mental health issues, or maybe you look at it and you're like, I know what that is. It shouldn't have that in here, right? So that you can start the conversation, because that's what we want you to do with your youth, is be prepared to have that conversation and know what those things look like. That's my speed talking, and that's all the fun you get. The next stuff is working. I'm just kidding. Here you go.
But she ain't lying. So we're gonna dive back into the book, guys, and try to wrap it up, because I think our first event over here starts at 10 o'clock, if you are signed up for it. So, we're gonna go to page 50. So if you guys want to find page 50 in there, we'll quickly go over some stuff. So the first ones will be identifying current substance use misuse and substance use related trends. So the journey to identify where the community was and where it could or should be was not easy and challenging. While expected, challenges were not expected. We're not always entirely predictable. Of course, the most challenging hump we incurred was COVID, the bad word, which pretty much plagued the entirety of this whole process. So other challenges we ran into were the need to determine what is important to our community. We had to get people to listen. We had to consider the whole community as a collective audience and strive toward comprehensive audience engagement. The need to determine what is important in our community. We accomplished this by having focus groups in our community with people from different walks and perspectives of life. These were people in different community agencies. These were college groups, people in active use, and even people in recovery. These groups were able to see our community. In these groups, we were able to see our community through their eyes and what they thought was missing, or what trends that they saw in our community that we did not. So we had to find and connect with like-minded coalitions from other locations. This is reaching out and finding partners, even if their community was not an obvious match for our community. Here we worked with UNC, and we targeted at least 5 counties that were comparable to Burke County. But out of those 5, we were only able to meet up with 2 coalitions to discuss what they were seeing in the eastern end of the state. This is Jeff Hill up here. He is the director of WCSPC. So this is Wilson County Coalition. Super nice guy, and we learned so much from him. I like to always give them credit. They still work with us. This actually was just took a couple weeks ago at the Community One Conference. So they're just really great people. We also went to ECU and we met with their coalition, which was PCCSU. And I'm just gonna tell you, they had nothing. So when we went there and started telling them everything we've done, they were like, what? We don't do that here. And they had major walls that we thankfully do not have here. Of course, that's a community with a big college and big party city. And you run into some big politics there, people that have money on pubs there. So underage drinking was huge. And there was really nothing they could do about it. So we try to stay in touch with them and kind of hurt our heart a little bit that we couldn't help them more than what we could, you know? So developing awareness among all members of the community, not just those immediately impacted or personally affected. So conquering the attitude of it's not happened in the house, so it's not my problem. We hear that so many times. We get into so many organizations and they're like, we don't know what you're talking about. That doesn't happen here. And they're just not aware of what's going on in their community and in their house. So we were able to reach a diverse group when we started doing our Secrets Revealed simulation that Brady told you about that's over here in the corner. This gave education not only to teachers, administrators, counselors, churches, and agencies, but parents and grandparents who may not know what was being hitting in their homes. We had a great success rate already with this. A counselor at Freedom High School, which was seeing a lot of the overdoses from the edibles that were bringing into the high school. She said that she knew the young lady was overdosing by going through the simulation and seeing the stuff over here. She was able to immediately call 911. They went ahead and administered Narcan to her because she went out. But she said she would never have known had she not went through our simulation. So we identify service gaps. We had to determine how needs were being met and determine what was needed, as well as what models already existed for implementation or expansion of programs here in Burke County to meet those needs. That included reaching out to our existing organizations to figure out what all Burke County had to offer. Once we had that data in hand, we started researching other counties and what programs they offered and what was working for them. We then brought some of their programs here to Burke County that we thought we could tweak a little to fit into Burke County because we knew that that would help with some of our problems going on. But at the end of the day, we always have to remember that Burke County problems need Burke County solutions. So making a meaningful impact on the youth. So not for the sake of prevention, but to inspire them to make a change if needed. And the way we approach or address something that literally is still in adults and adolescents alike on a daily basis. So going into the school systems now, we're seeing just dynamic change, I guess, is coming through, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. But just seeing that, the impact right now on our youth, and so now we're trying to figure out how to get in front of it because prevention is key, but you know, you can't really show the results of prevention, but now our Burke County youth are hurting so bad from what's going on in our community. So the next would be identifying the following trends. I think that it is important that even though the attention is turned back to opioid use because of the funding that's coming through the settlement we're getting ready to get, we can't take our eyes off of the methamphetamines here in our community because they are continuing to rise. You guys know that fentanyl use is on the rise. That is because people are either using it straight out because they figured out that it's better not. It's being used as fillers and other substances such as like pressed pills. And it can be unintentional cross-contamination. We have youth that come through drug recovery and they test positive for marijuana. And it kind of scares them because they're like, how is that? Or it may even be laced with benzo. And they don't even know what that is. You know, they're just like, oh, I promise I smoke marijuana, that's it. And so we have to explain to them cross-contamination and how this stuff happens. Pressed pills are on the rise. We're seeing that here in Burke County with our youth. Xanax being a huge one push right now. We've lost a young lady to that. It's causing multiple overdoses. So fentanyl really is the filler in these pills. It creates a better quality of high, and the dealers know the product becomes more desirable, so they'll start using it. As you can see up here, that's the fatal dose of fentanyl for a full-grown adult. THC infused edibles have a major impact on the market, and they have been the cause of multiple overdoses, and these are what's in our youth right now. Several Burke County Public Schools have been plagued with this in the past couple months, as I told you about the one girl who overdosed. And we have to remember that substance use trends are just like clothing and haircuts. So right now we're seeing wide leg, bell-bottom jeans coming back. Of course, you guys have seen the mullets rolling around town here. I never thought that a mullet would come back, I swear. So now that we're in the school system, our youth is telling us that cocaine is on the rise. It is coming back into our school system, and this is making a comeback from the 1990s when this was the popular substance back when we were in high school. So it's kind of scary to see that one coming back around. So now that I kind of went through that very fastly, I'm gonna hand it back over to Kim, and she's gonna go over the proposed initiatives and programs section.
So when I look at this slide, it disturbs me that I was in high school there and I'm really not on the other end. So I find all of these really, really interesting, but Brady talked about a celebration sandwich. I kind of think we should end with a little celebration. Solutions I find are really exciting, but we can't have solutions unless everybody's on board. And so we put together a series of proposals. We do have some members of our advisory team that are in the room. This went through a very long process. There was a lot of research that was done, a lot put into these. There is not a ton of detail in the proposals because it depends on what we as a community want to adopt, what we can get funding for, and there are funding notes in the actual proposals themselves, but it depends on how all of that works. We don't want to put details into something before we're ready to do it. Details today are not going to be the same details that we need tomorrow, so I think that's really valuable. So if you're looking at your report, I know this feels like class, but you guys are doing such a great job. We're looking at page 55, meaning we're almost there. It's exciting, right? So I'm gonna go through a lot of the proposals that we have. The first one, we already have a program that exists called Harbor, and our Harbor coordinator is actually here, Vanessa Austin, she's in the back of the room. One of the great successes of our community has been Harbor and developing this program that can serve as a hub. When the idea for Harbor came about, what we wanted to do was turn it into a recovery community organization, or an RCO. Essentially, that's a community hub where people can go and get wraparound services. You have partnerships with agencies like the hospital, DSS, the health department. You've got peer support services, all of these things in one location. That is a beautiful idea. We've done a lot of research with Wilson County. They have one called RC3. And then Wilkes County has R3C. We also called them and told them that was not helpful. We need to name them different. It's very confusing. But we've got models that we can look at, which is exciting to see how we can merge all of that together. You'll see in your actual booklet, it's not going to be cheap to make it happen. A lot of these are going to cost a lot of money. Now, I can see heads turning, and I can see people going, but wait, the opioid settlement. Call me. So the funding from the opioid settlement is not necessarily going to go to these proposals. I'm just going to throw that out there. We do not have control over that funding, the county does. The county will also be receiving these proposals and this information. BSAN is a part of those conversations, but I do just want to throw it out there that just because we have an idea that funding could be coming, don't get too excited. I'm your reality sandwich. That's what I've got here for you. So our other piece that we wanted to talk about was the Hope Alliance. So Wilson County inspired us to add this to what we've got, and we actually have a partnership with them that they're allowing us to use their model if this is something that we want to adopt. The really cool part about the Hope Alliance is actually housed in one of their law enforcement offices. Individuals who need referral to residential treatment can go into the law enforcement office. They meet with the coordinator of this program, and they are referred to residential treatment. But it's even better than that. They have scholarships for residential treatment. They have funding that provides transportation. They also provide assistance when that person gets out of residential treatment. That's one of the big pieces, right? I finished residential treatment. Where do I go? I don't have a place to live. Where do I go? They handle all of that case management. So you can kind of see case management is becoming a theme through this. Wraparound services becoming a theme. Lee talked about those service gaps. Those are one of the things that we want to fill in. What do people need that we're not currently providing? So also BSAN. Breakfast is not cheap. So it really helps to have funding to keep this coalition going. The staff that you see here today, we are all paid to be here. I mean, we would be here anyway, but to do all the work of the coalition requires funding. We did want to include that we do think BSAN should continue. You guys with me on that? Yes, okay. It's not just the bacon, right? It's all the cool stuff. I just want to make sure. And a lot of the funding pieces that you see in here, it could be in addition to what's already funding it. A lot of things we can receive through in-kind donation or in-kind support, especially manpower support, which is really useful. Also working on youth-focused prevention. So when we talk about prevention, that can be community-wide prevention, which we already do. But youth-focused prevention is huge. We address everything downstream. We're pretty good at that, actually. We're really good at hearing people floundering around at the bottom of the stream and going, oh my gosh, did you hear that scream? We need to go help somebody. Why don't we think about, well, how do we stop them from falling in the stream to begin with? Well, we have to go upstream and start addressing things. Are people going to fall in anyway? Yes. Does that mean we can avoid the entire stream? No. It means we need to be there every step of the way to figure out how do we stop what we can stop, and how do we fix what we can fix, and how do we find the people that fall through the cracks, and how do we help them? And also, how do we help their families? How do we help their children? How do we help their communities, etc.? That's a huge ask, and that's a lot to do. And it takes everyone in this room, everyone on the Zoom call, and everyone outside these walls to make that happen. Narcan. So we currently do free Narcan distribution. It is pricey. Thanks to different grants that we have, we're able to continue this program. Narcan, a box of Narcan like this costs us at a discount price $75 a box. That's the discount price. That was a great time. She's really mad about that. If you go to a pharmacy, you're probably going to pay out of pocket $125 a box, so we appreciate our discounted costs. Even your insurance copay for Blue Cross Blue Shield, for example, is about $40 a box. That's a lot for something you may never need. This is an insurance medication. I hope I don't need it, but I've got it just in case. How many of you have auto insurance? That is scary, but not everybody raised their hand. I hope you do not drive away today. So yes, you should have insurance, right? And with the rates of overdose that we have, we really hope that everybody has these. How many of you have Narcan on you right now? All right, we'll look it up later. How many of you have it in your car? Okay, it's gonna be like over 80 degrees today. Read the box, it says don't do that. You can go ahead and use it, but it's gonna have a different half-life based on the damage done by the heat. But I'm just throwing it out there. It is currently free. People need it. We need to put it in everybody's hands. I had somebody ask me, there's 89,000 people in the community. We don't have 89,000 overdoses. Why do we need all this Narcan? Well, at least I had an answer because I got a little sassy at that point. We have folks that are overdosing on such strong opioids that we're using 8 to 9 doses to bring them back. That's 4 boxes. Most people have 1 box. You might have enough to wait until EMS gets there, which is the whole idea, that you can at least keep them alive until emergency help gets there. But if we're talking about 656 people overdosed, those are only the people we know about. What about the people that had Narcan in the house, overdosed, they brought them back, emergency was never called, 911 never called, cops never called, never went to the emergency department. How do we know about those? We don't. And so this is sort of one of my pet peeves, that I hate the question, why does everybody need it? Because you never know what would happen. You have no idea. Again, it could be your Sunday school teacher. You could be in church and the person next to you overdosed. I know that is shocking that I said that. But it goes back to, it doesn't happen in my house, it's not my problem. What if it happens in your yard? It's your problem. All right, I'll back off a little bit. So harm reduction. Now, this one has a lot of caveats, and you'll see all those caveats in your report. When we talk harm reduction, blow it up a little bit. We don't get really crazy, because one of the things that we want to acknowledge is that Burke County's problems require Burke County solutions, right? So that means that the harm reduction we suggest be in place in the community needs to be something the community is willing and ready to accept. This is a process. You don't throw syringe exchange in the middle of downtown and think everyone's gonna be okay with it. I guarantee you they are not. That is very, very controversial and a very big issue. So a lot of the things that we're talking about are syringe exchange. Maybe not one for one, but hopefully we'll get to that point. We also, Narcan is definitely harm reduction, right? The community, and I'm not talking the planning team that wrote the report, the community is not willing to currently accept other things like showing people how to safely inject, giving people cookers. That's just a little too far for what Burke County's ready for. I'm gonna be honest, that's a little too far for what I'm ready for. But my work's a little different than what a lot of people do. And so when you look at this, we have to think about, and I love this image because it is people over politics. And how do we do this? And where do politics come in? And how do we pay for all of this too? A lot of grants will pay for a syringe exchange program, but you have to find the needles somewhere else. They won't pay for it. Explain that to me. I'm a little confused on that. We had some really interesting political conversations about crack pipes. Are we cool with giving people crack pipes? Where is enabling, where is harm reduction, and where is that line? So I would say right now Burke County's pretty conservative, but at least they're willing to go with a conservative version of harm reduction. If it's right now Narcan and syringe exchange, let's take it. We don't say no to a little bit, we say yes to a little bit and hope tomorrow they're willing to say yes to a little bit more. I will tell you, we even proposed to our advisory team, what do you guys think about Narcan vending machines? Notice that's not in your report. There are communities that have Narcan vending machines, so we were looking at some radical ideas, but again, if the community's not ready, why would we throw it in their face? All right, MAT. This is also considered a form of harm reduction. We personally don't see it as that, we consider it a form of treatment. MAT, or medication-assisted therapy or treatment, also known as medication-assisted recovery, and you'll see it both ways in the report, is considered the golden standard for North Carolina. So we have two different kinds of treatments that are popular in Burke County, MAT and abstinence-based. One of the things we really, really want to emphasize is recovery is personal, right? So when someone comes in and they say, I don't want to use anything, we don't say, but you have to have MAT. You have to be on Suboxone. That's the only way you're going to recover. Well, not if that's not their journey. Absolutely not. So we want to have two options. MAT is one that we need to continue to fund because it works for a lot of people. There's a reason why it's considered the golden standard, but it's not the only standard. So that's one thing we really wanted to emphasize through the report also. Support groups. We wanted not just to continue supporting support groups like AA, NA, there's a couple others, Celebrate Recovery is pretty popular in this area, but also assisting these support groups in understanding that there is more than one pathway to recovery. We had a lot of individuals who have lived experience talk about they went to an AA or an NA meeting and said they're on MAT and were asked to leave. That's hard. Where's your support group? We have found that recovery requires community and requires support. So if you don't have that, how are we assisting in recovery? We are helping our neighbors to live better lives, right? And so if we're not supporting them in that, what are we doing? So we educate groups like this. We also work to develop MAT-specific groups, even MAT-specific treatment groups. We have to be inclusive and open all at the same time, which I know sounds counterproductive, but it really can happen. Transitional housing. How many of you have heard that term? Yeah? So that's a big one right now. Has anybody tried to help someone get placement into a shelter recently in Burke County? Was it super easy? No, it is very, very difficult. We have a large homeless population, also discussed in the report. Substance use and homelessness are very oftentimes tied together. Sometimes one leads to the other, or it could be vice versa, you're not sure. But there are not a lot of places for people to go. If we don't address social determinants of health, how can we address the situation that they're in? I love the graphic that our UNC guys shared about that has all the concentric circles. I love that, where you plug it into the logic model. If you don't have this, you don't have this, how can you recover? If you don't have this, but you don't have this, how can you recover? If you don't have a place to call home,
you don't have a place to go to, a safe place, how can we expect you to recover? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you don't have food, you don't have shelter, how do we expect you to do something like recover from substance use, which is the only thing that is bringing you comfort, killing you at the same time, but it makes you feel better? How do we address that? So transitional housing was really, really important to us. And also residential treatment. That is a huge push that we're seeing in the community. And I'm just probably gonna get in trouble, but I'm gonna throw it out there. We look at our community, this goes back to the upstream, downstream conversation, and we go, there's all these people downstream that need help. So obviously, if we build a residential treatment facility, we will fix it. I'm pretty sure there's 64 pages here, 65 mentions this, there's 64 pages that say, you know, not really. There's other stuff that we need. So we can address one end, and I'm gonna say this again, but you've got to address the entire continuum. If you don't, you are failing the people you're trying to help. So, in saying all of that, now what? You've got this report in front of you, it's all nice and shiny. It's got pictures, you're welcome. We thought that would be nicer than having to read all those words. But now what do we do? So we worked for 3 years, putting all this together. We worked with UNC, they put together this fantastic website. Thank God, because I'm not that person. Put all these pieces together, we did all the research, we have all these proposals and recommendations. So this is where you guys come in. And I don't just mean the people in this room, but I mean the community itself. What happens with this report, we will be sending it to county commissioners. This report also goes to a lot of other people who are influential in the community. This goes to leaders of organizations. Sasha was helping me pass out these reports earlier, and I don't know if you wondered, but there's 2 boxes of them. Well, there's not 2 boxes of reports with the people in here. You guys are line 1, that's line 2, right? So we're putting it all together. What are we gonna do with it? And what can you do to help? Well, you can be advocates for the proposals that you agree with. If you don't like a proposal for a certain reason, I'm pretty sure you guys can speak up. If you don't like it, tell us why you don't like it. If you have questions about it, ask questions about it. If you love it, advocate for it. You know, stand up for it, say what you like about it. Go to the BSAN website, know a lot of the pieces on there. There's a virtual training library, lots of virtual trainings. Use those, use all the pieces that have been put together. Contact us, if you have questions, let us be your point of contact. Just because work recovery had a 1.0, which I'm gonna say was the top of the leaderboard, that was not our goal, was to be the top of the leaderboard as far as connected pieces. But it's because we want you to have one single phone number to be able to call. The staff of the coalition happens to work at work recovery. That's why it looks like that. Watch the videos, learn more, like and share. Do all of these pieces. Take this report and go tell somebody about it. If you want to take extra copies, I'm cool with printing more. So take an extra copy with you. Keep it in your office. Share it with your staff. Share different pieces. If you want to make copies of just the proposal section, use it. So it's not just an isolated event, what we're talking about today. It's more than that. It's bigger than that. This is your community, and it can't be 3 people saving it, because it won't work. It can't be 30 people saving it. It won't work. It's going to take 89,000 people to save 89,000 people. So that's my call to action. Does anybody have any questions or comments or curiosities about the plan itself for our UNC team? Anybody? Anything? Do I make you nervous?
I know it. The BSAN
Yes, so the GIS site will be published on the Join BSAN page. They are going to post a video on there that you can watch that explains how to use the site. Yeah, because they're pretty awesome. Yeah, I agree. Anybody else? Questions? Yes, ma'am.
The GIS site will be up.
You said that publicly on the floor.
No, nobody else.
I pointed it out. You're welcome. Any other questions? No? Okay, so if you are signed up for Secrets Revealed at 10 o'clock, it will likely start right at 10 o'clock. Before you leave, if you would please sign in on this sign-in sheet. This is really helpful. This helps us get our funding. This helps us ensure that you guys get the information that you need. I also want to share, we talked about Trident Task Force. It's pretty awesome. Their logo is pretty cool. The kids love looking tattooed. I think it's really cool. But we have a summer camp this summer, last week in July. It is completely free. The only thing kids have to do is bring their lunch. 8 to 5, Monday through Thursday at New Dimensions. They will learn lots of really cool skills. They can get letters for college if they would like to do that. But they can work with mentors to develop a really, really awesome piece. We've even partnered with a consulting group that is working with UNC School of Pharmacy, and they are letting us use the summer camp as an advisory group for some pieces that they're working on, and the kids could possibly get paid to participate. How cool is that? You send your kids to a free summer camp and they get gift cards. Awesome. You'll be the coolest parent ever. So all you have to do is scan that QR code to sign up your kid. I'm sorry, but everyone in here is too old to participate. Yeah, I called you old, but that sounded terrible. Is not young enough to participate. So thank you guys very much. That's all the paperwork we've got. If you're in the 10 o'clock room, if you will please hang out and we'll get you started pretty soon. Thank you very much.